All right. Good evening, everybody. We're just waiting for a handful of stragglers to tune in. Thanks for joining us tonight. We've got an awesome lineup. Really excited about this one. You have just Dave and I tonight because KWM team is stretched a little thin with festivals and whiskey calendars to build and all kinds of shenanigans. But this lineup, I've tried 4 of these whiskeys previously. They're awesome. I think you're all gonna really enjoy it. But we're gonna wait a tiny bit longer just for a few stragglers before we formally get rolling. And I'm just finishing getting a few things set up here on my end. Yeah, maybe while we're waiting for some of those stragglers, I'll just say a quick welcome to all of you, but also to our friend Dave Boutique-y Dave, who's joining us live from jolly old England, where it is now 5 minutes past midnight on Sunday morning.
It is Sunday morning.
Yeah. And Dave, you've got your vest on there tonight, I see. You've got
I thought I'd dress up for you again this week. Yeah, but it's been a long day, I must admit. I got up early this morning to watch the rugby in New Zealand. Not as early as I did last weekend to watch England play Canada, which was a cracking game. But that started at 3:30 in the morning.
Oh, dude.
This morning's game started at 6:30, so it's a little bit more civilized. So it's been a day full of rugby today, but a disappointing result in New Zealand. Gutted.
Well, still, it's, as long as it was a good match.
It was good. The girls are great. They're absolutely fantastic. They were super. All the games have been superb. Big fan of what they've been up
to. Dave, while we're waiting, I'm going to just do. I'm going to
housekeeping.
A couple things here.
Emergency exits, toilets at the back. Yeah,
exactly. All that kind of stuff. So. One of the things we like to highlight, just upcoming tastings, because we do have a few more tastings coming up. Somewhat surprisingly to me, there are still some spots left for our Glenfarclas 2000 vintage tasting next week, which has quite a few sherry bombs in it. These are all family casks, 2001, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I think 6, this is the first time we've ever had 2006. So that was kind of cool. That's why we were excited to do this range. They're available for pickup at any point. There's still 3 tickets left if you're in Calgary for our wine festival next week. So that's coming up. Port is sold out. Buzzard's Roost is coming up. I think those are all ryes. I'm not really entirely sure. I should, it looks like rye. I should know a bit more about that, but I am a single malt guy after all. I do like a good rye, but single malt is where my heart's at. And then this tasting, which still surprises me. It's kind of cool. There's 3 20-year-old Edward hours in it, which we've never done at a tasting before. These sherried old millstones are phenomenal. Dave can tell you all about that. He's got one coming up. Yeah, one of your 10th anniversary releases coming out.
25-year-old millstone, which is just, these millstones are from not sherry casks as we know them, but sherry casks that come out of bodegas that are 100 years old or more. So 25 years, there's very little wood, but it's big, bold sherry flavors. It's fantastic.
The one that you've got coming, Dave, like the best way I can describe it is gooey. It is like syrupy, gooey, thick. It is just delicious.
It's opaque.
And what else? That's sold out. Oh yeah, and then the Kinship. That's the last virtual tasting that we still have coming up, where there's still spots left for it. 7 whiskeys, including a bonus Lafroig that we threw in just for good measure. Quite a good one too. And one last thing, because it actually relates. Is that your bottle there, Dave? Look at that.
The color there. You can't see me through it.
You sure can't.
Yeah, that's our 25-year-old, one of his oldest.
Yeah. Well, and Patrick Van Zwiedem is an incredibly talented distiller, makes wonderful whiskeys, and actually makes very good rye. Probably some of my favorite rye is coming out of that distillery. Have you guys must have bottled a rye if you've bottled single malts from him?
Yeah, we have bottled one rye from him, at least one rye from him. This was our fourth batch, I think it was. Batch 5. So yeah, we bottled a couple of malts and a rye, definitely. Everything he does, and we bottled his rum as well. Because he makes rum. We haven't bottled any of his Geneva, but that's bloody good too. I mean, everything I mean, he's just a master distiller because he distills and ages everything.
Yeah. He makes his own cassis. He makes his own like rum, liqueurs. Like he's all over the map. And I suppose you couldn't bottle that Genever unless you wanted to start a boutique-y Genever company, which probably isn't on the high list of priorities.
It's not on the high. I think we were, I think we were talking about putting it in the boutique-y gin lineup, but we've just sort of softened back a little bit on the gin with just the key ones. We haven't gone mad with all the gins at the moment, just the key gins that we've got for boutique-y.
Well, makes sense. I'm going to highlight one last thing, which, and partly because it relates to both KWM, but also That Boutique-y Whisky Company and its various subsidiaries via Adam Brands. But the big news this week is that the KWM whiskey calendar is finally ready for pickup in store as of today. If you need one shipped, they'll be ready Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week. But we have quite an assortment of Advent calendars this year. There's a Prosecco Advent calendar. Stiegel has an Advent calendar, which I'm wondering if it's just 24 bottles of Stiegel. I'm not really sure, but they've got their own one. And then from Boutique-y Whiskey, Adam Brands, Drinks by the Dram, we've got a rum Advent, a peated whiskey holiday calendar, which we have to call them holiday calendars for reasons Dave and I won't get into. There's a good story and it's kind of funny, but yeah, not really worth mentioning. There's the Drinks by the Dram whiskey holiday calendar, and then the list keeps going because you guys make your own boutique-y, just exclusively boutique-y whiskey calendar. Which
we do.
This should be loading. Here we go. There it is up on the boutique-y holiday calendar on the far left. There's a gin advent calendar, and then more stuff. There's tons of stuff. A Scotch whiskey one from Drinks by the Dram. And then, of course, the craft beer advent calendar here. So lots of advent calendars, so say, and they're all in stock and ready to roll. So Dave, on that note, we've got a really cool lineup here tonight. We've got 4 blends with a footnote on one of them, and 2 single malts and a blended malt. And I think we should probably dive right in. I'm going to type up the order just so people can follow it as we go, but we're going to start with the 52 year. We're then going to do the 22, 32, and 42 in that order.
Yep.
And then we're going to move on to the Allt-A-Bhaine, the blended malt, aka Glen Scotia, and Ledaig to round things out at the end. So I've typed that out. I'm going to post it into the chat here in just a moment. But Dave, thank you for joining us from deepest mid Bedfordshire. Did I get that right?
That's the one. Deepest mid Bedfordshire. Yeah. Deepest darker. It's been a lovely day today, I must admit. It's been very mild.
You've had some great weather as of late. I know 2 weeks ago when we were chatting that it had been 20 odd degrees most days. It's cooled down a bit, but I think 17 today was the high around here, which is pretty good. Well, we climbed back up to 0 after a week after a week of minus 15 as a high here in Calgary. So, yeah, it was sunny and the snow's melting.
Someone asking questions. Rugby game. Okay, I watched all the games today. The Springboks lost today. The French beat them. I'll always support Northern Hemisphere teams. Home nations first, then Northern Hemisphere teams. I never support the Southern Hemisphere teams. And yes, the French beat the Boks tonight, which was fantastic.
Wow, good for the French.
Aye. I've got to just work out how to get the chat up so I can see that now. That's cool. Excellent. Aye, right. So yeah, I thought we'd start. Well, when I first laid this out, I thought we'd start with the Allt-A-Bhaine and then just chatting with Andrew just before we came on. And I'd actually line them up with the blends first and then the malts last, because I knew we had to finish on the Ledaig. And I was just thinking, well, you know, the Old Orford's is 52 years old and it's 35% ABV, so it's not whiskey. So I thought we'd start there. We had to label it as a spirit drink. We bottled this at 35%. It was something we found, and I tried to look at where we got this from, if I got any clues of where this sort of whiskey came from. And I delved into this great old book. If any of you got this, or if you find a copy of this, it's just a great old reference book, Schweppes Guide to Scotch, because it lists so many brands and companies that were around. And this was printed in 83. I think my first edition was in 83. And at that time, 99% of all of the Scotch whiskey, 83, yes, all of the Scotch whiskey that was bottled was blended Scotch whiskey. Just 1% was going to malts. So there's hundreds and hundreds of blends, thousands of blends in here. And so trying to find something to line some of these up is kind of difficult. You know, you always look for turmoil when these parcels of whiskies come from, like companies changing hands and distilleries changing. So I have no idea, but all I have is that we only had 138 bottles out of this cask. It wasn't a cask, it came in a barrel, and we had an age of distillation at 1964. So that's all we had, but we tasted it and thought, wow, it's worth buying, because it was tasty, and yeah, it's just thought we'd put it in this set because we had this 22-year-old, which we'd already had around for a while. It was a bigger batch that we just sort of published, really. And we had the 32 and the 42 that were in our hands as well. And we thought we'd put a whole set together, 22 to 52. It's just like a little joke, the answer to life and everything. There was a 42 in there and all that. So yeah, we thought we'd bottle it. And when we had these three blends, rather than, we had three blended labels, which we'll see on blend number 2. We had three where we first started. We thought we'd have a little bit of fun with these labels and took our inspiration from this and from the old blends of yesteryear, effectively. But we wanted to get all of the teams' names on the labels. So this is what we call, what am I doing? Wrong, press the wrong button there, didn't I? Share screen, that's the one I wanted to do. There it is. So we had a little play with the first, certainly the new labels that we did for this. We had a little play and we tried to get as many of the teams' names on the labels as possible. So this was Old Ainsley's, was the inspiration for this label, Ainsley's whiskey. We wanted that too late bottled vintage because we bottled it too late. As a little joke, it's a little shockingly bad pun because it's only 35%. That coat of arms up there is actually one of the team's family names. She's no longer with us. She's moved on. She got headhunted by another distillery, so she's doing marketing from them. But we tried to put the family coat of arms up there with a little bit of a play on it and got some cats and dogs on it for the people's pets. Yeah, Aaron Alford is one of the team. Felix Deer down the bottom, specially selected. We wanted to get as many of those puntastic things, deluxe and extra special and all those sort of things on all of these labels, and say that the labels of yesteryear was what we wanted to do. But Old Alford's, Felix Deer down the bottom, specially selected by Felix Deer. Felix is one of our cask buyers. He's also a bonsai tree enthusiast. He has a selection of bonsais, and so that's what we wanted on this label. We just wanted a little play, and you'll see with the other two that will come up, St Thomas and Cutler and Stubbs, we had this little play trying to get as many of the team, their names, certainly their names on the label. So this is our Old Alfords. All I could find out is it came from 1964. So there was a lot of blended whiskies from there, and where this came from, I have no idea. I think it might have just got left in the back of a warehouse, as you know, the casks get moved around between customers. You look at all the amount of brokers in here and blenders the companies of blenders all in Glasgow and Edinburgh and a few up in Perth. There's a lot of companies that have disappeared over the years in little parcels as they've gone. So these whiskies have been moved around, and this one just got left behind somewhere and then got offered to us. So it's a little bit of liquid history. There were only 138 bottles. I say that was all we had of this one. Old Liquor Whiskey, that's the label that we took inspiration from. We just need to get all those special words on vintage, specially selected, and too late. So lots of sort of dunnage warehouse of overripe fruits. So obviously it's been in wood for a long time.
It's quite nutty. I'm getting a really like a prominent, like polished shoe leather sort of note to it, or even like this is a very Canadian term, but I can speak personally about this because our new dog likes to steal my wife's moccasin slippers. A wet moccasin would be
yeah, actually wet moccasin, pure dunnage, sort of musty dunnage sort of notes is where we. But it's really quite fruity on the palate, sort of. I mean, the alcohol obviously is a little bit lower, so it's not going to cut as much as a 40%. But it is really silky and mouth coating. But there's that sort of lots of wood still, but it's quite soft on the wood really, rather than chewing pencils. But yeah, it's interesting. We thought it was worth bottling. I thought having it and adding it to the collection really is a 22, 32, 42, 52.
It's very nutty on the nose. It stays very nutty on the palate. Like macadamia nut butter, crushed walnuts. But you're right, it starts to get sweeter, fruitier. There's this nice kind of velvety base of vanilla in there, and some nice soft fruit tones too.
It's lovely, yeah. I mean, it is a little drop of liquid history. Can't tell you anything about it. All I could find is 1964. And you know, Scotch was in a boom period in the 60s and carried on. So 60s and 70s and to the late 70s and then the early 80s, and then everything started to catch up with them, and this loch was building. And yeah, this is where the next two blends will come into it, is that I think that the 42 I got down at 76, somewhere from 76. We bought these pre-blended. They were blended.
Well, Dave, did you even mention, I think you mentioned, we were talking before, that it had already been put into glass, like it had actually been, it was no longer in cask at the time you acquired it. Is that right?
This one was in cask.
Okay.
This one, well, when I've looked at it, it said we bought. I was looking at the sometimes we get some bottles. Sometimes we bought it in bottles. We get offered in bottles. Sometimes it's in IBCs sort of thing, in a bulk container, not as big as that, but in a drum. So it's been taken out of wood and put into a drum and then stored somewhere because we didn't want it to go too far. Someone else didn't want it to go too far, but yeah, we bought these pre-blended. We haven't done anything to these. We've just been offered these parcels of whiskey and we've taken them basically. Now, some of them were, you know, I know some of them were Edrington blends. Certainly some of our early batches of blended whiskey were Edrington blends. Certainly blended whiskey number 2, which we're coming up to next, a 22-year-old. Our first batch was an 18-year-old. And I definitely know that was Edrington blends, and I know that had Macallan and Highland Park in, and Tamdhu and Bunnahabhain, those sort of malts coming into it, and then some of the big grain whiskies. But this one I have no idea. All I've got is an age of 1964.
I mean, yeah, I agree with you on this. And I think when we get to the 42, like that to me tastes like it's got to be an Edrington blend. We'll find out if it is or not. That's my thought on it. But yeah, this
I
is, you know what, Dave, I was a little worried about this because it was at 35. I was a little worried that it was going to be very flat, very unbalanced, over the hill. And I think it might be nearing the crest of the hill. And I don't think it, other than strength, I don't think flavor wise it's gone over because it's not bitter. I mean, I'm sure you've had a lot of old bitter whiskeys,
yeah.
um, overaged whiskeys left way too long in the cask. And I don't think that's the case here.
Well, it's 64. Yeah, it must have been taken out and put into drum for some time. Yeah, it must have been sat out and put back in. I don't know, but we had it. It came out of a cask, and I've got 1964 on the paperwork when I was just looking for it. So that's all I could find out for this one. But a little bit of blended Scotch whiskey of yesteryear.
Mhm. And not a bad place to start. And, you know, I think it really was the right decision to start with this. You know, there's this mentality I think that we have where you want to save the best for last. And I think humans also naturally have this inclination where we tend to overrate things we've had more recently as opposed to things we started with, especially in a tasting range. But I think it makes sense. I think that this might not have shown as well had it, you know, been placed later in this lineup and people's palates had gone through a bit more of a workout.
Yeah, so I quite often put some big ones to start off a tasting because I want people's palates fresh. But this one, I thought, well, if we're going to taste all these higher strength ones going forward and then slip that in at the end, I think probably this one would be the best place to start, and then ramp up gently because the next ones are all quite low. The blends are all quite low, aren't they? The next one's like 41, and then we've got a 40, and then we've got a 44. So the blends are quite, because they're old. And they've been sitting around for a while, some of them. So they are quite low in ABV. So start there and then we'll move up because the malts are a little bit higher. Yeah, they're up in near the 50s. So
before we move on from this one, as we go through the rest of the lineup tonight, I am going to share the links on our site to each of these products. This is the only one that's not on our website. And the reason for that is, you know, Dave was mentioning they only had, do you say 128 bottles, something like that?
138. And yeah, there isn't any, I haven't seen any for a long time over here. They disappeared really, really quickly.
We have the privilege, we had the privilege of receiving a dozen of these. And I'm just going to check to see how many of these we might have left. So according to this, we've sold 6 as sets. We opened 1, so we have 5 left. We are probably going to keep that only selling this whiskey as part of a set. And if you want more information on that, I'll get it for you before the end of the tasting. But part of the rationale there was for how old this is, because it's under strength, because as Dave explained, they can't call it whiskey. It's priced low for how old it is, and given there were so few, we wanted to give people that were collecting the full set the first chance to buy all 4. After that, we will, and I think we offered a deal too if you bought the set of 4. But after that, we are going to open it up. But what I will do is, if anyone in tonight's tasting wants a set of these, we'll make that happen. If we still have some of these left on Monday, we will put them up on our website as a one-off that people can purchase. But we wanted to give you a chance to try them and do this tasting first too. And the 32 and 42, I'm excited. But Dave, the 22 is good as well, so maybe we should move on to that one.
Yeah, let's do the 22. So this is so when we first started putting some blended scotches together, we had our blended, we call them just blended Scotch whiskey number 1, 2, and 3, and we launched blended whiskey number 1 back in 2015. It was somewhat, we didn't have an age statement on it. It was about 35 years old, and it was Edrington stocks as far as I remember, and there was definitely talk of Macallan being in it, and it was the whiskey that won the world's best blended Scotch whiskey back in 2015, and it put Boutique-y Whisky right on the map. Then we did two other styles of whiskies. The blended whiskey number one and blended was sort of the older stuff. It's always been 35 to 45, 50 years old. Blended. Then we did a younger version of it, really blended to be sort of smooth. All the rough was it. Blended one had the spear on the label, so rounded. Blend number two has sort of the space gloves, stroking sort of space velvet as it's been smoothed out, and blend number three has got this long finish. So we had a 18-year-old, and I know the contents of that blend. We did have that as a competition on an earlier label, and this is our third batch. It's a 22-year-old. It was a huge batch, so it's been out for a while, and then we pulled it back because we don't actually put everything. Sometimes we bottle it all, and then it hangs around in a warehouse for a long time. So this one, blend number two, is from 1995. 1995, yes, I believe this is 1995, and it was in sherry butts, and we bottled a lot of it. There was like 1,650 bottles, and it's been a big favourite of many people's over the years. But we did have a lot of it held back under bond, because as soon as we bottle it over here, we keep it in bond rather than bring it into the warehouse. Otherwise, we have to pay duty on it. So it's sitting there in bond, and we pay duty on it, and then we sell it, or we can export it. But we didn't do anything about it really, apart from just take it out to a few shows. It's been in a few advent calendars over the years. 22 years old. It was a release of 1,650 bottles, 41.8% ABV, and it fits that blended Scotch whiskey profile number two. And I'll just get the label up here. There's a whole set of these 1, 2, and 3, but this is a little bit different. Here, you've got that one up there now, haven't you? Yes. So yeah, the blended whiskey number two, 22 years old, 41.8% ABV. It's a bigger batch, but there was only a few bottles, I think like 400 and something bottles left when we put this out with this collection. And it's been one of my favorites for a long time. And a few of my friends, it's been a big favorite of theirs. But one of the guys, one of my whiskey pals on his blog voted it as the whiskey of the year for him. And it was a really good value whiskey over here to buy as a blended Scotch whiskey for 22 years old. The 18-year-old before was just superb as well. And the first batch of that 18-year-old went into an exclusive for a little wine shop over here, Majestic Wines. And they had a competition, and we guessed the makeup of this by the clues that we had on the label. This is obviously a different label, but we had a label with all the different characters on there. So there's Tamdhu in here, there's Bunnahabhain in here, there's Glenrothes in here, which puts it into that Edrington blend category. But
Dave, I think I grabbed a bottle of that in, I want to say, like 2018 or 2019 at Whiskey Live London, because I bumped into you and Sam at that show, and yep. I think Sam sold me on that because I think I've got a bottle of that blend.
Yeah, we first brought that out in May 2018, and we took it to a couple of shows. Yeah, absolutely, I definitely had that. I'd take it around with me everywhere because it's one of my favourites. It's my go-to. Over here it was about £65 a bottle, which is I put it up against Royal Salute, because Royal Salute was something I really love as a 21-year-old blended Scotch. If I see it at the right price over here, I'll buy it. Mm-hmm. And I did get the opportunity to taste this and that one together at a show, and Royal Salute's 40%, 21-year-old, and I put this up against it, and the Royal Salute just fell apart, and it was really upset me because I love Royal Salute on its own, but when I put this up against it, this just bashed it out the way. I mean, it just steamrolled through it. It was just so much more mouth-filling.
That's not too surprising, and I mean, yeah, the Royal Salute, I think it had its time and its day and its place, and it's still going to sell in bulk, but I mean, like a lot of things that are made in smaller batches and maybe with more care, To me, it's not that surprising that that's the result you got. To me, it would be like putting Guinness up against a craft stout from like a
Oh,
small microbrewery. Guinness is going to taste like water when you put it up to like a craft stout.
yes, yeah. I understand where you're coming from, but just that I had this in my head of what I thought Royal Salute tasted to me. That that memory that I love Royal Salute, and you get a bottle of that and just drink. It's like when you go back and drink Chivas 12-year-old, or you go back and drink. It's just like familiar. I mean, I haven't had Chivas for a long time, and don't have it in the house generally. I haven't got a bottle downstairs. I've got an 18-year-old downstairs, but when I go around to a friend's who's got a bottle of Chivas and put it in the glass, and, oh yeah, this is good. This is nice. But yeah, it did just together. They didn't work at all. Our one just walked all over it, basically. A lovely drop of blended Scotch whiskey.
Dave, are we allowed to talk about the perhaps somewhat more racy description of your label for this whiskey?
Oh, what, the people at Whiskey Fund?
Yeah.
I
believe Angus, I don't know if was it Angus or Serge, which of the two of them?
That would be Angus for sure. Yeah. It depicts a white glove striking a hairy space testicle. Yeah. I mean, so the three. I don't think I've got. I might have a blend number 1 in the background here somewhere. I think I've got a blend number 3 with me, but yeah, this is the first one that really like the big moon. So this is the blend number 1, Scotch whiskey number 1. So we have the sort of the gloved hands with the shiny ball bearing. This is a 50-year-old, so this is batch 5. Yeah. And yeah, this was the smooth one, the one being smooth, and the other one has got 2 white gloves with a steel bar going off into the distance, which are meant to indicate that it's got a very, very long finish. It's blended to have a very long finish, but yeah.
Was Angus tempted to describe that one as a shaft?
I have no idea. Depending what time, what mood you get Angus in.
Exactly.
If he's feeling, if he's feeling really humorous, he's great. Love Angus.
Jeff and Victoria's got a new marketing slogan for Chivas.
It's not the taste of disappointment. No, they all have their places. I love going back to those whiskies that you had a long time ago. I was in an airport a little while ago, and they didn't. And normally, you just anywhere in the world you can pick up a bottle of Johnny Walker Black, and Johnny Walker Black is a quality whiskey anywhere in the world. If you just want to drink whiskey, not out of a Glencairn, if you want to drink it out of a mug. I like drinking whiskey not out of a mug, but a tumbler out of a. Not the taste of disappointment. Oh dear. But yeah, you can always pick those sort of whiskeys up.
Dave, do you remember the Live with Chivalry campaign that Chivas did that was like kind of playing off old male stereotypes? I think somehow if you played that Live with Chivalry with the taste of disappointment, like that,
that'd be boutique-y, wouldn't it? Yeah,
that would.
That'd be boutique-y. Aye. Yeah, I do like these big old blends around. You know, if you're traveling around and you just go into a bar and you see Johnny Walker Black up there, you just go, you're going to get what you get. But I was in Spanish airport on holiday a little while ago, and they didn't have Johnny Walker in there, but they had a bottle of Ballantines on the counter. I thought, I haven't had Ballantines for years. I don't know what it's going to be like, and it was actually rather pleasant. I must admit, I was pleasantly surprised at how easy drinking it was, and it's just what you wanted to get down your neck before you poured yourself onto the plane, so that was okay. But I don't mind cheap blends.
If you go in with appropriately low expectations, you can be so pleasantly surprised.
That's right, yeah. That's right. I wasn't expecting
Yeah.
great things, but I was pleasantly surprised. Yeah.
Well, and I'll say this, like, I've been critical throughout my career at times of Johnny Walker, but I agree with you. The black is great. I think the gold label as well too is often a very well made blend. I will say though, having memories of what Johnny Walker Blue Label used to be like 15, 20 years ago, the Blue Label now is rubbish. And I'm more than comfortable saying that it is not worth, it's not even worth what they charge for the gold. The gold I think is a better blend, but
Wow.
that's just that's me speaking from the heart.
Yeah, I get you. I've had tasted some old Johnny Walkers from the 60s and 70s, and it's very, very different. I did find a bottle of Johnny Walker that was from the 60s. And yeah, that was just fabulous. I mean, Johnny Walker Black Label, 12-year-old, absolutely banging. And it didn't last long. I did take it out and share it with everyone, which is it's great to do. You know, but
absolutely.
So yeah, this is really lovely, isn't it? It's really gentle. It's sort of really velvety smooth. There's lots of chocolatey notes, which I really love. It's just a little bit of whisper of that smoke in the back of the glass. Must be a little bit of peat in there. Anyway, should we go on to the 32?
Yeah, let's have some Highland Coup whiskey.
Some Highland Coup. This is yeah, this is a great label. So this was the label for this one was taken from St. Leger, and it's married from St. Thomas. Yeah, St. Thomas. Now I think this is from the mid 80s. So this was laid down in the mid 80s as Scotch was sort of starting the wheels were coming off. And we did buy a bit of this, and hopefully we'll have some other batches that will blend some other stuff in and slowly evolve it. That was the plan. We've got some stuff that we would like to play with it on. I did some trials here with some of this, and then adding some 33-year-old malts into it. But St. Thomas, where's that label? Where's that label? There it is. I love this label. Emily was given a brief. So you've got that. St. Thomas. Liz Thomas is one of our whiskey team. She is our custom sales. So she sells lots of single casks. She sells lots of boutique parcels to our customers around for exclusives. And so she has a list of whiskey that she's peddling. And so that's St. Thomas. That's where Liz Thomas comes in there. We wanted to get that extra special. You've got Worthington's finest oak casks, because I love that I just love seeing marketing speak with the finest oak casks, and it just makes me laugh every time. I used to work as a boat builder a long time ago, and you know, writing boat standards, yacht standards, and putting into a specification saying varnish to a yacht standard, good yacht standard, just doesn't mean anything. And it's like finest oak casks and hand picked. Phoebe Gilbert and daughters. Phoebe's really in charge of the whole team. So yeah, it's just another one of those ways of getting everyone on the team. So we've got 3 of us on here: St. Thomas, Phoebe and me on this team. So yeah, we've got 3 of us on this label, 2 of us on the last label. So we're not a huge team. Yes, and St. Leger had a horse, I believe, in this same sort of style of label. I don't know if there's a picture of it in here.
Were there flies flying around the horse's head?
Oh, we just thought we had flies around there because there's a Highland Coup, and there's always flies flying around the coup. So that's a bit of a giggle. Liz loves this, and her mother loves. You know, I saved a heel for it after a tasting. She took it home for her mum, and her mum would pour this last little inch in the bottom of the bottle. I said, "You've got to drink it. You've got to drink it. You've only got that much in the bottle. It's got to go. If you want a new bottle, I'll get you a new bottle." But yeah, don't just leave that little tiny drip. You've got to taste it. You've got to drink it.
Hey, Dave, for batch 2, you could maybe do St. Walter's finest. I'm just saying, he's quite photogenic. So
it's good. It's
he'd be more than happy to pose for the label. I assure you. He's kind of asleep right now. I'm gonna put it back in. I rudely awoke him.
So yeah, just 41%, 40.1% ABV. And this is lovely.
Yeah, very fruity on the nose.
Mm. I mean,
So
this
nice
could
kind of-
easily have gone into our blended Scotch #2 label. It could have gone under that label easily. But yeah, this is, say, from the mid-80s. Now, I think I know where this came from, because this is a little bit familiar, and I was trying to look for this in here, and I think this comes from a blender in Glasgow. They're no longer there. It's like Senach. And there was a blend for older whiskies over 30 years old. 30 years old was called Senachi. And I've seen this. I remember writing tasting notes for a Senachi 40 a little while ago. Quite before I started working for Boutique-y. There was a guy who bought some casks, Senachi. And I remember finding this similar whiskey in China when I was out in China. And sitting in a little warehouse, and someone bought me a sample of this whiskey, and I knew it immediately. It's funny how you pick these things up. And I think it's what I think it is. Senachi. But it was from a Glasgow blenders. Why isn't it in here now? Or maybe because I can't actually do alphabetical order.
Dave, while you're trying to find that, I just want to ask a question to people if they get a little trace of peat in this. Because I find it's got a nice malty, chocolatey palate. There's some nice fruit in there. The nose, I got this like creamy funk, which I really love. But on the palate, especially towards the finish, I'm getting like a little faint trace of peat.
So yeah, I think this was from W. Brown and Sons, Scotch Whisky Blenders and Bottlers Limited from Glasgow. They had old malt whiskies, and Senachi was the brand name used for 30 years old bottlings of single malts coming from the Glenlivet distilleries, the exact provenance of which varies from time to time. But they had some other Ancient Privilege, Black Stag, Candy Mist, Diplomatic Privilege, Glen Stewart, Seven Earls, and Seven Earls was a 20-year-old. But this really does just comes across as that Senachi sort of style. But yes, that sort of old smokiness in the back there.
Mm-hmm. Some really nice milk chocolate tones.
But there would have been more if this was distilled in the laid down in the mid-80s. There would have been a few distilleries still using, floor malting still. A lot of those floor maltings were closing between the late 60s and the late, Glengarry closed in 95. So there's a few of them as they were slowly changing over. So there could have been floor malt in here and some old peat in here. Oh, it's very, very gentle. Very, very gentle. Earthiness rather than that smack in the face peat.
I can't recall. I don't think I shared, or did I? No, I did share the link for the 22-year, which is a very good price, $112 for a 22-year-old whiskey. St. Thomas, I think, is a pretty good value too. We've got that at 185. I'll fire the link into the chat here. I think some people maybe don't look as favorably on blends as perhaps they often, they don't get the credit that they often should. There is a lot of mass market blends out there that are fairly boring, but I mean, this is a really lovely, complex, elegant whiskey. And I think it's superb.
A little bit of liquid history, really. This stuff we did buy it. We've got a bit of this to play with.
And Dave, I think it's fair to say that it is extra special.
This one is extra special. Yes, they are extra. Of course, it's extra special. Yeah, I love this. It looks very pretty. This label. It looks pretty on the bottle, I must admit.
Yeah, Jeff, I agree with your sentiments. I've been saying for a long time that Compass Box has done more to make blended whiskey relevant and cool again than any other company out there. But obviously there's other players, independent bottlers like Boutique-y, like Berry Brothers and Rudd. You could name a bunch of others that have done a lot to try to make compelling and interesting blends. And when they are good, they are still a rare example of places where you can still find value or good value for mature stock.
Okay, should we move on to the 42?
If we have to.
You have to. This is another cracking label. Again, inspired. This seems to, I'm sure it's like a cross between whiskey and beer, maybe a bit of black and white, but also Younger's Tartan, Cutler and Stubbs, which we thought was a great name for a whiskey. Toby Cutler and Josh Stubbs. Toby Cutler is our cask buyer. Josh Stubbs does loads of admin stuff and keeps it all the artwork briefs and the labels. So he's the go-between between us and Emily. Yes, he does so much. Does Josh? Toby is our senior cask buyer and knows a lot about great whiskies and wines and everything else. Yeah, Cutler and Stubbs. So we've got their two dogs. They both are dog owners, and then we thought we'd graft their faces onto the dogs. We've also got OM Gosh on the bottom there. That was Jenny Gosh, who used to be the brand manager for us. She's moved on now. But we've got Choice Old. We wanted Deluxe with the E on there. Extra Old Scotch Whiskey, a special blend of all these shockingly bad puns that were always used as advertising in the olden days. This is 44.1%. Now, this comes from 1976. I can't find a reference for this anywhere, but if we look back in 1976, there was a lot. Just far too much. What did I share? My bottle said number 3, but the picture had number 2.
And Dave, before you take the screen down, can we just comment, like, this had the label? I love that it's framed with the carpet you would see in a rural hotel in Scotland circa 15-20 years ago.
I think this tartan actually comes off, the inspiration for this came off of an advertisement that we saw. It's toned down a little bit. Younger's, I'm sure this reminds me of a Younger's tartan, Younger's beer, but I may be wrong. We did have a sort of a big storyboard of all these different old labels that we put and said we want a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and we want that. Yeah, we want blended deluxe. We need deluxe with the E on the end, and we need extra old. Yeah, we're just trying to find as many of those old advertising slogans. Choice Old. But yeah, this is delicious. But yes, 1976, which was the long hot summer in the UK. That was the first long hot summer that everyone talks about still. Lots of big droughts over here. Lots of stuff stopped doing stuff.
Before my time, I must admit, a couple of years before my time. Dave, I'm confident, if I had to guess, this is Edrington stock. It has that profile of something vaguely Macallan with maybe some Tamdhu, maybe a splash of Highland Park to give it just a bit of salt and peat.
Yep, Glenrothes.
Yeah,
definitely. I think so too. but it's not linked. It's not written as that anywhere. I've got a 76, and I've got something else on there which I can't find reference to anywhere. Well, maybe that's more modern. I don't know. But it's bloody lovely. That's for sure.
Not sure what happened there.
So yes, that's our blended Scotch collection: 22, 32, 42, and 52. The answer to life and everything, I think, is hidden in there. Oh, that 42 is good. Yeah, that 42 is more. My wife doesn't drink whiskey at all, she says. But there's always a bottle of Deanston 12 in the cabinet because that's the one she really does love. And then when she tasted this not so long ago, oh yeah, I really like that one. Oh, can I have some of that 42 again? No, you can't, dear. Delicious.
Hey, Dave, sorry about that. I had a bit of a keyboard malfunction here that somehow did some funny stuff. I'm not sure exactly what happened there. But yeah, I think my computer went wonky for a moment, so apologies there for that. And sorry, Dave, I had to mute you because apparently my keyboard started unmuting other people. Full disclosure, I spilled a bit of 42-year-old whiskey on it, which is both heartbreaking and possibly ruinous for that keyboard, but time will tell.
And kind of, that's amusing. That's why I moved my keyboard behind me. I've only got a notebook here, which is used to having whiskey spilt on it anyway. Yeah.
Well, in my defense, this is probably my 60th or 80th virtual tasting in 3 years, and that's the first time that's happened. So I'm overdue.
So yeah, these were all the whiskies number 1, 3, and 4 are all batch number 1s. They're all something we've never bottled before. Blended whiskey number 2, which was the second whiskey, the 22-year-old, is our third batch. So it's whiskey number 2, but it's batch number 3 because we've done reiterations beforehand. So batch number 1 was an 18-year-old, and number 2 was an 18-year-old. Batch number 3 is a 22-year-old, but it is still blended whiskey number 2, similar sort of stocks. There were just out of the 30 at the St. Thomas, there was just 391 bottles that we put together out of this batch, and the 42-year-old just 443 bottles, and that's it.
We Dave, I don't know if I'd mentioned this to you when I saw you in Europe a couple of weeks back, but we actually bottled via Berry Brothers and Rudd a 40-year-old blend with a profile very similar to this. And what I love about it is you've got those sherry tones in there, but you've also got like loads of fruit, kind of heading into that tropical direction in terms of profile. And yeah, it's just, this is beautiful old whiskey, very well balanced, not over oaked, so you're still getting like a lot of complexity and layers, but with just a beautiful profile to it.
Yeah, it's a lovely profile. It's a really easy drinking, works well out of a big tumbler, I'm telling you. That is very nice. So that is our little blended Scotch range. I mean, sadly, we haven't got the 50-year-old in there with the blend number 1, and we've got, I don't think we've got another batch of that coming through for a little while, but we've definitely got a new batch of batch number 3 coming along, which I tasted a little while ago. Where's that sample? I think that's around 25 years old. That's coming up a little bit later in the next. It's not out here yet at all, but that's very good too. And that will be under the black sort of White Hands in Space label. I think all of those blends are quite good for introducing people into the whiskey, I'm pretty certain. Yeah. I think they're all nice, easy starter whiskies. Not starter whiskies, but they're rounded. They're well rounded. If someone, there's not that big alcohol. The balance is right. That's what I'm trying to say. The balance is perfect. Sometimes you get a whiskey in a glass and the balance is a little bit off, and it will put people off, especially if they're not used to drinking high strength alcohol. But these are really well rounded. I mean, those years in the cask have done that for us. And the blend from the beginning would have been a great blend. Obviously, someone had a plan for these going back when these were laid down in the mid 80s, 76, 64. There was a plan. When you make a blend, there's always a plan of where this is going. And obviously, things change over the years, and these casks get picked up by other people, and I think, well, that's not within our plans, and then they get moved on, and people like us buy them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of these are quite chocolatey, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, it's just all around delicious. I think the 32 and the 42 are just both, and it's not to say the 22 doesn't have its place and it's not good, but I mean, they're both just lovely examples of mature whiskey with lots of complexity to them. And the 42 is an example of a style you don't see a lot of anymore, that old school style of whiskey, just a bit of sherry in there. You could put this up against, the highest end Johnny Walker's, the highest end Chivas whiskeys, and I think it would hold its own.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, these are quality blends. Absolutely. I think the 22 is absolutely spanking as well, and certainly for the price. But the 32 and the 42, they're the next step up, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad we did what we did with these labels, because I was basically going to put this into 42 into the rounded one, and the 32 into the blend number 3, because similar sort of profiles. But I'm glad we went with a bit of fun with the labels.
Dave, there's a good question here about whether you have any sense of the percentage of grain in the blends.
I have no idea on the percentage of grains in these ones. No.
Anecdotally, I would personally say that at least in the 42, I think it would be relatively low. The 32 seems like the grain percentage could be a bit higher, but it's so hard to tell just purely based on profile.
Yes, and it's very, very hard. And blended Scotch whiskey would be much lower ABV generally. They would generally take it around to around 46, 43, I would say. 40 for the UK market, but they hold that a little bit higher for the export markets, where it has to be 43.
All right. Dave, is it time to move on to the Allt-A-Bhaine?
Let's get a bit of Allt-A-Bhaine. So yeah, we're going to go for the 3 malts to finish off here. We're going to start with the Allt-A-Bhaine, because it sounds a little bit like Allt-A-Bhaine. It's a 23-year-old. Now, this is drawn from a single butt that was laid down in March 1995. It was a release of just 430 bottles, and we have bottled this at 49.5% ABV. Now, this is quite a modern distillery. I think it was built in 75. Pretty sure this was built in 75. It's quite a modern looking distillery on the back of Ben Rennes.
With no warehousing.
It didn't have any warehousing, because that's all down in Glen Keith and beyond. It was really built to supply bulk whiskey to the Chivas blended Scotch whiskies, and notably 100 Pipers brand. It also closed down for a few years recently, 2003 to 2008. I think it stopped making production. I think it was mothballed for a little while. And it is a really modern looking building, built in the 70s, and it is open plan unit, and really it was designed to be run by one man on a shift. So yeah, this is one of those workhorse distilleries. Never had a brand. They did try and do some peaty whiskey with it recently. I don't know how, because they don't have, Shivas don't have an Islay distillery. Our label on here, Allt-A-Bhaine, sounds a bit like House of Pain, and it literally, Allt-A-Bhaine means river of milk. And so that had to be on the label. And I think our very first Allt-A-Bhaine was chosen by the team at the Whiskey Squad, and so they ended up being immortalized on our label, and that's what we have on our label. So we have the river of milk, and we've put the Whiskey Squad as sort of cows. I have no idea why. Probably because of the river of milk, and we've got little sort of. We've got to try and recognize some of these people. The guy with the red hat, I do know that is Jason. The little monkey in the tree is Gin Monkey, and that's her sort of social media handle because she was there at the time. And we've got the little Whiskey Squad logo up in the top right-hand corner. The Whiskey Squad is a London whiskey club, one of the early whiskey clubs up there, and it really was, everything was blind tasting, total whiskey geeks, but not snobby about it. Anybody could come to the whiskey tasting and have fun, and it wasn't about guessing the whiskey, it was about removing those preconceptions of what you're tasting. And so you could young whiskey, old whiskeys, and it was a bit of a, sadly the pandemic really killed it. I haven't had any information from Whiskey Squad, but it's always run by volunteers. It was the tickets, they used to do 2 tastings a month, and then it went to 1 tasting a month because Jason moved out of the city, and it was a city, London, a whiskey club. I used to get the train down to have some of their meets there. They always had interesting whiskies. They often had interesting guests, and this is our Allt-A-Bhaine. Oh, I haven't had this for a long time, I must admit. So this is, you don't see a lot of Allt-A-Bhaine around, I must admit. And certainly this age, 23 years old.
Yeah, it's
with a few batches. This is batch 9.
It's definitely an independent bottling, Dave, that, as you say, does not get around. I mean, you could look at other distilleries within the Chivas group, like Glenbergie, Milton Duff, Glen Talkers, which you do see a fair bit more of. Allt-A-Bhaine you don't see very much of. Like, it's quite rare that we'll see bottlings of it.
This is really lovely. I've forgotten how good this is. Just going to write this down, put this on my shopping list.
It's quite milky, I would say.
It's creamy. It's very creamy, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned that earlier, and I wasn't expecting it to be quite as creamy as that. I've forgotten about it. This is really lovely. This is my sort of cup of tea, Speyside whiskey. I must admit, I'm a big Speyside. This is light. It's
vanilla jello pudding.
It's gentle. It's a little bit of orchard fruit coming through there, sort of stewed apples, lightly stewed. Yeah, this floats my boat, I must admit.
The palate is very juicy, creamy, loads of vanilla, sweet, fruity, toasty.
And that's it. That's 49.5% ABV, and that is so beautifully balanced. That just slides down. And that little bit of like like a little bit of sherbet fizz at the end there. Sherbet lemon. One of my favorite candies. Green apples. Someone said green apples. Yes.
Yeah, like Jolly Ranchers. Green apple Jolly Ranchers on the palate.
It's just, that's very delightful. I've forgotten all about this one. I must admit, I did forget all about this. You see, I'm very fortunate, and I do pinch myself every day that I've been given this opportunity to do this, because this is not my background at all. Whiskey was my passion, my hobby, and I'm still pinch myself every morning that someone called me up and said, "How would you like to do this full-time, Dave?" And I'll be doing more, not just for Boutique-y. He's been talking to the team about me doing more whiskey stuff, which is great because I love doing whiskey stuff, and I'll be doing more. I've just been learning how to do little videos for Instagram. So if you like this week, I've had to taste all of our very special Scotch whiskies that you can see on the back here and do a little video recording of them, which I don't think they've come over to Canada yet, but they might be on their way. Like a 25-year-old Ben Nevis, a 25-year-old Klein Leash, a 45-year-old blended grain, a 50-year-old Glenfarclas, and a 31-year-old Allt-A-Bhaine. So little videos of, and yeah, this is great stuff. I pinch myself every morning. I'm just surrounded by whiskey. Office is surrounded by whiskey, and this is my work environment here. And then downstairs, I've got another cabinet, like 3 of those that you can see behind me with my whiskey in, which I sit and drink downstairs.
There's the work whiskey, and then there's the after work whiskey as well.
Yeah, this is the office whiskey, and there's very little of my stuff in here. There's a couple of things in here of mine. There's a couple of old things in the background, but everything else is work whiskey. I try and keep it really separate, otherwise it becomes a blur. When my son was in this room, this was his bedroom, I had the mixture of work whiskey and home whiskey downstairs, and in fact, nearly all of it was work whiskey downstairs, and my work whiskey was all in home whiskey was in boxes, and I wanted to get my whiskey back out to drink all of my stuff. So yeah, I'm fortunate that I do have everything around me, and I've forgotten how good this is. Thank you very much for bringing it to the tasting tonight, Andrew. Oh,
no, well, this came in bizarrely. It was on an offer that we received for the blends and the Northwest Euro malts or whiskeys.
Yes, the Northwest Euro. Yeah, this was part of the Northwest series. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, no, and to be honest, Allt-A-Bhaine is not a whiskey that I sample very often.
No.
I'd say there's probably 50, 60 whiskeys that I have a general idea of what their whiskey roughly tastes like. And obviously casks, all those things play a role. But Allt-A-Bhaine is one of those ones where I have absolutely I have no concept of what an Allt-A-Bhaine tastes like, because there's just not enough opportunity to sample it. And it's kind of cool. But Dave, I have a question. One of the cows in the river appears dead. Did it drown?
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah, I know. That's what I have no idea why.
And there's also a Highland coo that appears to have broken one of his legs.
I think that is, there's one of them that appears to be, I think that's someone who's drunk in the river. There is one in a rah-rah skirt. There is one with a plaster on their leg. Now, these will be because the guys at the time when the first label was done, the guys and girls of the Whiskey Squad had various idiosyncratic things that they were taking. So someone's sitting in there drinking a cocktail, someone always gets drunk. So they would have described who they are at that first briefing of the label, and then the changes that go through, little things like flowers and another cow's been added, but yeah, the cow jumping over the moon. But no, I have no idea. The only one I recognize immediately is the hat. Now Billy will be in there somewhere. Billy Abbott will be in there. That's the one with the red hat is definitely it's Jim Monkey I recognize. Yeah, I have no idea who they all are at the time.
If I had to guess, Billy Abbott is the black and white cow in the bottom left-hand corner. I don't know why, but that just kind of seems it seems like the most Billy-esque of all the cows.
I would say, yeah, I was thinking it could be the one next to Jason with the red hat on, Jason, because Jason and Billy were the founders of
there you go.
Whiskey Squad. They were definitely the founders. But yes, I haven't been to the Whiskey Squad for such a long time. In fact, I haven't had an email from the Whiskey Squad because I think that the pandemic really shut everything down.
Well, having talked about Allt-A-Bhaine, is it time to head to Soup Town?
Yes, this is a cracking label. I really like this label on this one. Yeah, we're going to go to blended malt Scotch whiskey. It's blended number 6, 24 years old. It's our first batch, 48.8% ABV. It was 659 bottles, and it's a vatted malt. It's not teaspooned, it's a vatted, and there's lots of clues. We try to put a bit of fun on this label, because we weren't allowed to say what it is, but we say what it is in the label. So we have a number of different things on here. And when I first saw this, there's a lot of things. It's Soup Town, a lovely town. Welcome to Soup Town. There is a big soup manufacturing in Speyside called Baxter's, which is a Scottish soup. And I forgot about Campbell's, and Campbelltown, a lovely town. It makes sense. Soup Town, Campbelltown, a lovely town, Soup Town. So there's a Campbelltown clue. So yeah, the bulk of this is, and if you look along the little shops here, you've got a taxi, which is Glen Scotia taxis, Glen Scotia, rhymes with Glen Scotia. And there's a little Highland Bloom in it. So there's a bit of Highland whiskey in it, and it's by the Bonnie Bank, which is the little bank here that's coming in there. So what it is a bit of Loch Lomond, Bonnie Banks of Loch Lomond, blended with Glen Scotia. So it is a Campbelltown with a bit of Glen Scotia. Loch Lomond in it. That's a cracking little label, but it did have me confused when I first got to it, but I quite like it now. With the little clues in there. Campbell's Soup is an American company and Baxter's is Scottish. So I was, well, Scottish, it could be Baxter's. It doesn't taste like Speyside, and there's, you know, Lossy, Glen Lossy, the Lossy Mouth. There's a military base up there with aircraft coming in, but there was also one down in Campbelltown as well. But
well, I think there's a spaceport there now too. Isn't that where Britain decided, or the UK decided they were going to have their spaceport in Campbellton?
Is that right? I don't know about that. No.
It comes across very Glen Scotia-esque on the nose. Glen Scotia to me always has like this engine oil quality, and sometimes it's clean, sometimes it's dirty. This is somewhat in between, like maybe you're in between oil changes on this one. Salty, but there's also like a steely, irony note to it, and some cheesy funk. And I mean, those are things that I often get in Glen Scotia, because in the era when this was being made, I'm assuming we're talking like early 90s. The Scotch whiskey industry was not doing well.
No.
Glen Scotia was barely being operated. I remember in the early 2000s, the first time I went to Campbellton, to Springbank, they showed me around Glen Scotia. And at that time, Glen Scotia was operating a couple months a year, and it was guys from Springbank who were operating it. Like it just was. So right away, you can think they're not in a rush. They're really long fermentations. But the other thing about it is Glen Scotia was neglected at that point in time. Like it was dilapidated, falling apart. The washbacks were cast iron. And this is in the early 2000s. Flaking off chunks of rust as the fermentation boiled away in there. And everything about this place made you think, how can they possibly make good whiskey? And yet, I'm a huge fan of Glen Scotia. And in some ways, I think some of the elements that were neglectful about the place made unintentionally better whiskey. Like they weren't hurried, long fermentations. So also not hurried, slow distillations. And copper takes out things like those iron elements, at least most of it. But yeah, it's such a fun, funky whiskey.
And then a long time in the wood will also take more of that stuff away. Yeah, absolutely. It's like that, you know, the Isla 25-year-old. So many distilleries in that period were being run by, you know, as these as these big companies were buying up distilleries, DCL, Allied were buying up glass distilleries, and they were mothballing one and then getting the team to go in and just get it to ticking over so it didn't die completely, so there was a resale value. Absolutely. Yes, when they were running them in without any maintenance in them, just putting fillings in there, putting it into any old wood and then just leaving it. And this is why this sort of stuff comes up. And it's not suitable for a brand as such, a big brand, but for little independent bottlers like us to come out, actually, this is really rather interesting. It's got a little story behind it. We can make a funky label out of it and tell a story. And it's actually really, I remember when we first got this sample, I'm like, oh man, this is good. This is good. And we'll have some of this. And we have some of this.
Yeah, it's there's like loads of like salted caramel, soft fruits. It's kind of like somewhat Springbank-esque. Like Campbellton does, by virtue of there only being 3 distilleries and 2 of them being owned by the same company, one of them being operated at times by that company as well too. There is kind of a Campbellton style, and it's that kind of maritime, oily, thick style of spirit.
It is certainly big in the mouth. It's bigger mouth coating, isn't it? It's not just sort of, if you go back to that gentle, sweet, fruity breakfast, Allt-A-Bhaine, bit of cantaloupe melon there coming through. And you go back, you've got that. It's not as oily as a dirty Glen Scotia. This is, like you say, it's in between, isn't it?
It's somewhere in between dirty and not dirty for Glen Scotia.
There's a little bit of a slightly sour fruit note rather than the sweet. It's good. I love it. I loved it the first time we took it, and but I'm gonna get a bottle of that Allt-A-Bhaine. That's what I'm gonna do immediately. I've got a shopping list open. I'll have a little drop more of that, because that's
Before it's too late.
yes. It won't be much of it if there's any.
Well, Dave, if you can't find one over there, you can always bring one back for you. So we'll figure something out on that front.
I'm a bit of a Speyside nut. Yeah, I just love a good Speyside whiskey, and certainly those distilleries that you don't normally get hold of because it all goes into blends. I do like them the most. Like Glen Tockers is one of my favourite distilleries. Dalhousie is one of my favourite distilleries. Linkwood, I can't get enough, and I forgot about Allt-A-Bhaine. But then you can get some grassy Allt-A-Bhaine, and this is not grassy at all. I can't remember what Michael Jackson says about Allt-A-Bhaine. It was Jason and when we were doing Jason and Joshua, we were doing a silly game. When we were doing the Uncorked, Sam and I like to play silly games and bring silly games to the equation. We did a little chat with Joshua and Jason of Single Cask Nation, and they had a little game for us, and they were reading excerpts from Michael Jackson's book, and we had to try and guess the distillery, which was a lot of fun. But what did he say about Allt-A-Bhaine? It's always interesting to see what someone like Michael Jackson would say.
Well, Dave, to be fair, I'd be very curious to see what he has to say about Glen Scotia, because I don't think Glen Scotia had caught on by the time he'd written his last book.
So he said house style, light, slightly vegetal. Yeah, that's what I always think of Allt-A-Bhaine, was that glassy, and this isn't that sort of. This is gorgeous, flowery, spicy aperitif, which I love. Nice and simple. What did he say about Glen Scotia? Let's go there, shall we? I do like his little. How do you Glen Scotia that way down?
For our millennial viewers tonight, the Michael Jackson he's referring to is the late great whiskey writer and not the pop star. Just so we're all on the same page here. Michael Jackson, the pop star, did not write a book about whiskey.
Malt Whiskey Companion. I think there's a new vote. This is edition 6. It's all been updated. This has been updated by Dominic Roscoe and Gavin D. Smith and others. But I think there's an 8, a 7 or 8 now out now. But all of the volumes are good. What did he say about Glen Scotia? What did he say? House style, fresh, salty, aperitif, or with salty foods. That's all he said about the house style. Along with Glengyle and Springbank, Glen Scotia is one of the last survivors of the Campbelltown malt whisky region. And the distillery has suffered during the past few decades from periods of silence and lack of investment. A major program of renovation took place between 1979 and 1982, but production has been relatively sporadic ever since. Under the ownership of the Loch Lomond Company, Glen Scotia currently distills some 100,000 litres of spirit per year, and it's just a meagre 15% of its total capacity. Yeah, that's when it was just limping along. And they did release a series of whiskies of single malts in 2014. That were just dreadful. They had the Disco Cow series, if you remember the Disco Cow series. Dreadful looking. I mean, there must be a cult collectible label and tin if you got that now, but they were just so garish. But new Glen Scotias are superb, and I've just had a 12-year-old, the new limited edition one, which is just banging. It's been in an Amontillado cask.
Dave, some of those Disco Cow ones were actually quite good. The 16, I think, was a brilliant whiskey. And I remember the guy at the time who was their sales manager was this chap, Andrew Gray, who'd been with Bruichladdich. And he came into town and said, "What do you think of the new Glen Scotias?" I was like, "Andrew, people hate them. They're ugly. They're like the Glen Scotias," and it was Inchmuir was the other release. They're the ugliest bottles. And he said, "But they're triple screen printed."
Yeah.
Andrew, nobody cares about the technical merits of how you made them look ugly. They're ugly.
They were dreadful looking things, weren't they? Just horrendous looking things, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, an ugly bottle with good liquid in it is still better than a pretty one with garbage. So
absolutely.
Well, we've got one last whiskey to move on to, Dave. And I'll be honest, this is one that I struggle with from time to time. I am not a self-professed lover of Ledaig. Sometimes it works. More often than not, it doesn't. But I'm interested to see how this one stacks up.
It's just the nose. Who's putting intoxicating train wreck over nose? So much oil, ash, and cigar leather. Is this and manure? This must be the Ledaig. Oh yeah.
Oh man. I like instantly I get the two big notes I get in Ledaigs, which is like old rubber hockey dressing room floors after a day of teams coming in and out, and blue cheese. Those are the two things that are just leaping out at me right now.
Yeah. Oh, blue cheese. Actually, this would be great with some blue cheese. And I have some Stilton in the fridge downstairs.
This is very Stilton-esque. If you left Stilton on the counter for like 48 hours.
Yeah, Ledaig can be hit and miss, definitely. And this is a 21-year-old, and it was from a single butt distilled in September 1997. 48.7% ABV. So we've had a fair bit of Ledaig over the years. So this is our 11th batch. The Isle of Mull and the little Tobermory distillery has had a bit of loads of turmoil in its life. It's been up and down, for some of its warehouses were converted for flats. The distillery was it was maturing cheese for years. In the 70s, I think it became a cheese maturation warehouse. It was storing cheese, but the modern incarnation of the brand really didn't come until 2007 for Ledaig. So the distillery Tobermory on the Isle of Mull, tiny little distillery in the middle of nowhere. Probably I mean, it really is difficult to get to. I just don't understand why you still want to make whiskey there today, because it isn't easy to get hold of.
It's a pretty little town though, Dave.
It is a pretty little town, but it is remote, isn't it? It's the same as Islay. I just don't understand why you'd build a distillery on Islay today. I know there are distilleries on there, and they need to be supported, but why would you go and build a new distillery on Islay apart from the romance? I mean, just trying to get anything done on Islay takes, as people who have built distilleries more recently know, it is, because Islay gets to charge 25. Yeah, okay. But if you're a businessman, well done, Jeff. Yeah, I just how do you get anything done? You just can't nip up to the shops and just get a new socket, or the lawnmower's broke, get a new lawnmower. I mean, this is the thing I was going through, because I was staying in a little cottage in Islay, and my daughter rang up and said, "Dad, I've broken the lawnmower. I'm just going to nip up the B&Q and get a new one, shall I?" I thought, well, how would they do that in Islay? You can't. And I started speaking to the neighbours and thinking, well, what do you do? You live by Amazon or whatever, but in the old days it was catalog. The old catalogs would come around and you'd order it and it'd come by mail, and then it's too small, it's too big, and you send it all back. And I said, well, you did about buying clothes and things like that. So we did have a shop on Islay that was selling clothes for a little while, but they stopped because we were all wearing exactly the same thing. The whole island was wearing exactly the same thing. And Tobermory is even further away to get to.
It is a shorter ferry ride, though.
It is a shorter ferry ride.
Although you have to get to Oban first, which is at least an hour and a bit further than it would be to go to the ferry on. I don't know, maybe. Well,
this is not. I've just let this go a little bit, and it is. I mean, there is that. I mean, it's very salty.
So the nose. The nose reminds me of like, it smells like old latex tubing, and as though someone is making brisket in a backyard smoker. So there's elements that I like and elements that I'm not a huge fan of, but I think the palate on this actually shows quite well.
I'm getting some sort of, I'm not a meat eater, so I've got sort of tarred hemp rope sort of thing on the nose, and as an ex-boat builder and yacht sailor, and yes, it's that sort of old rope on the nose, but there is some underneath, even on the nose, that fruit on the palate.
Yeah, there is a little bit of fruit there, but also on the nose, it's as though you've inadvertently wandered into a riot where they are burning tires to block the road.
Oh no, this is not as bad as that broger for burnt tires that we had a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, that was pretty burnt. Dave, as I said, the palate I find quite pleasant. It's a little medicinal, a little bit kind of menthol, minty, but I like the palate on this. I think this is quite drinkable.
Oh, Jeff, not a big fan of. I usually fail to find any redeeming qualities in Ledaig.
Yeah, Dave, there's quite a divide at work. So Kurt and I are on the Ledaig is rarely great side, and Evan and Harmony are on the they love Ledaig side. So there's about a 50-50 split there. Sean, I think, might be somewhere in the middle on that. But yeah, There are people have definitely taken sides. We could say that.
Oh, that's good. I like that in a whiskey. Yeah, some of these whiskies, yeah, Ledaig and Tobermory for me. Some of them are great, and some of them not for me. And we have an unpeated Ledaig, so it's obviously casked as a Ledaig, but they put Tobermory in it accidentally because they make both there, and it's like 50-50 in a year, like half the year. I think the first half of the year is peated and the second half of the year is unpeated. Or it might be the other way around. I can't remember. We did do two 12-year-olds together from the same year once just to see them both together. And they were very, very good, I must admit. And the unpeated one was a 23-year-old. So that was a point of turmoil again. And so we had to have the Ledaig label, although it was a Tobermory in there. Our Tobermory label is this, because you can, if you stand at Bunnahabhain and on a clear day, you can look across and you can see the Isle of Tobermory in the distance there, and there's Colonsay in the middle. But you can see Tobermory, and so we've got them on the map there. And yeah, we've just got this sort of Thor-like character coming across from the Isle of Mull, coming over to Islay, which we can just see down the bottom of the label there. That is Islay, and you can just see Port Charlotte on one side and Bamore on the other, and you've got the Lochindale in the middle there, and just coming out that he can make peaty whiskey just the same as Islay can there. That's what we're trying to show on there.
Dave, I don't know if you know this, but the city of Calgary, where I live, is named for a white sand beach on the island of Mull.
Is that right? No, I do not know anything about Calgary apart from a stampede. I think that's is it a stampede?
Yeah, exactly. The stampede's the thing, but it's kind of crazy to think because I've been to both. I've been to Calgary Bay, and it's a beautiful beach. The water is ice cold, I can assure you. And there's one building at Calgary Bay, and that's it. But apparently the member of the Northwest Mounted Police, the precursor to the RCMP, vacationed there as a child. And when he came and set up Fort Calgary, he named it after this place that he vacationed as a child on the island of Mull. So that's the connection there. But yeah, Canada's third largest city proper is named after a sparsely inhabited beach on the island of Mull. So
I know a few friends who find it's their favorite place in Scotland, the Isle of Mull. And
well, Dave, have you been to Mull before?
I haven't been to Mull, no.
Oh, Dave, so I'm going to tell you, other than Calgary Bay, Tobermory town is beautiful. The distillery is cool. But at the south end of Mull, there's a 1 kilometer ferry that you can take to get to the Isle of Iona, which is where the famous monastery was. More European monarchs are buried on Iona than anywhere else in Europe, which is mind-blowing. This tiny 1 by 3 mile island. And then about 4 or 5 kilometers north of that is the Isle of Staffa, which has the famous Fingal's Cave, which is the Scottish connection to the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland.
Yeah. Oh no, I've seen it all on film, and but I've not been there. I've been up the west coast, and I've driven all up the west coast of Scotland, and it's fabulous. I mean, I must admit, it's a beautiful drive up there, up to Ullapool and Lockhew and all of those sort of places. But no, I haven't actually done Isle of Mull, and I need to get up there because, you know, my daughter Kat now works for Knocknean, which is on the Drimmen Peninsula, which can see Tobermory from. I mean, that's a remote place. I haven't. And
you know what? Just across from Tobermory, there's Ardnamurchan.
Yeah. Well, and Knocknean, you can see Tobermory as well. Across the Drimmen Peninsula, because they're right out on the Drimmen Peninsula, and so they can see the Isle of Mull across the peninsula. This is very, very It's a long way to go. As soon as I've got an in there now, I'm waiting for an invitation to go up there and stay for a little while.
I think you should.
That's so much to do in so little time.
Yeah. Well, and Dave, as per our last tasting, you and I are going to have to make a trip to Finland. I think we were talking about going to visit some distilleries in Finland.
Finland and Germany as well.
Okay.
Yeah. Some of the German distilleries, tiny little. I really want to go and see Allt-A-Bhaine, and yeah, Allt-A-Bhaine, Saltmore. The ones we bought, Sleers, even Sleers, Sleers would be a good place to go and see. And then we could do Netherlands on the way. There's so much to see, and yeah, maybe we should just do the whole Northwest Euro trip, and a few extras on branch lines. And it's not bad.
Jeff's saying if he had enough dollars, the distillery could be yours. It's currently for sale. Which distillery is Tobermory for sale, Jeff? Is that what you're suggesting? Then he says, I'd like to shut them down and do the world a favor, but it's out of my budget.
Hasn't Distell just been bought by Heineken?
Have they? That would be interesting. I mean, it'd be a good acquisition because I think
Heineken haven't got any spirit, that sort of spirit side of it, have they? I'm sure I thought I read that not so long ago in spirits industry news. I'm sure Distell Distell would be a good buy. Oh, I thought Heineken was selling them. Okay. Yeah, Deanston, Distell. I would love Deanston. I'd love them. All three of their distilleries, Bunnahabhain and Tobermory. Approves Heineken to take over.
Well, Heineken's buying them, is what it sounds like, taking over. Oh, that could be good.
Oh, they have bought them. I thought Heineken had. That's what I thought. I'd understood that they had. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Deanston and Bunner. Yeah, I'd love the three of them, to be honest. If you know, as Atom, that would have been a great acquisition. Those three distilleries.
2.5 billion though does seem like a pretty steep price for a very small distillery on the island of Tobermory, Bunnahabhain, and Deanston,
and the South African distillery.
Okay.
And if Distell, they've got a lot of stuff in South Africa with all the brandies and the Three Ships, James Sedgwick Distillery, and the South African brandies and the wineries and Amarula and Amarula as well, and the gin. They've got a gin and one of the biggest cider manufacturers in the world as well. Distell are a big company, certainly the South African arm of it. Yeah, very big. But I would love Deanston and Bunner. That would have been a good acquisition.
Yeah, Deanston's a cool. Actually, you know what, Dave? I've not seen. Has Boutique-y done a bottling of Deanston?
Yeah, we've done some 18s and 21s. I'm sure I've got some Deanston in the back there. Yeah, the Deanstons. We haven't had a lot, but what we had have been absolutely fantastic.
The reason I'm curious is I'm curious to know what the label looks like, because Deanston's a distillery that's got a lot of baggage that would make for great material for a label.
We have because it was a 60s thing. We have a hippie thing on the label for Deanston. Shall I find it? I'm going to find it for you. 1 minute.
So for those who don't know, the reason why Deanston's kind of cool is the distillery was actually a cotton mill for a couple hundred years, and the distillery still owns, I believe, the town, and different people in the town would have different types of homes depending on what type of job they had in this mill back in the day. And the de facto mayor of the town was also the mill manager, and I guess by virtue now of distillery, the distillery manager, and they had their own currency. They minted their own coins at one point too. This is before like standardized money was common. But yeah, it's a fascinating, fascinating place.
Deanston begins with D. There, D. I mean, it's. I like the label. It's sort of funky, but it's not. There's a label. So yeah, we've only shown the old cotton mill. There's a new building all the way in the front of it now, but it is sit alongside a river. That's really pretty.
Mm-hmm.
But the distillery was, and it got a huge, great big hydroelectric rotors in there.
Yeah, the third largest water wheel in Europe at one point in time.
And the vaulted warehouses are just amazing. Seriously beautiful. The old vaulted, and they have like a green roof above that as well, which is kind of cool. Yeah, we just put some hippies on a bus basically. Watching the copper pot stills go in there. It's a pretty distillery to go and see actually. Yeah, there is a new building all on the side of there, but the old buildings and on the top floors are empty. From what I remember, the top floors of the cotton mill are just as it was. There isn't anything, nothing's been done to the top of that tall building there. There is a modern building on the side of it, but it's as it was up the top there. It's like I remember being shown around that on a Jamboree trip a long time ago. Yeah, cracking little visit, and yeah, they've had a good buy there with Bunnahabhain, and if they bought that, I need to go and buy some more of that then, because they're sort of staples in the whiskey cabinet. Deanston 12 and Bunnahabhain 12 are just stuff that I drink every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best bang for your buck whiskeys, I would say. Become mayor and rule over everyone.
Yeah. But Jeff, I agree with you. There, some of the, a lot of this stuff I think is pre Brendan McCarran joining Distill, but there were some hit and miss, especially, I would say, especially on the Deanston side, some of those limited editions they came out with. But there's great potential there. I've had lots of great old Bunnahabhain. And you know, as we say, there's potential in Tobermory to do well with Ledaig. We'll just have to see if they're able to reach it. Now, Dave, I ask you this question every time we meet up about what might be coming in the pipeline that we should know about. What exciting new things might Boutique-y be in the process of rolling out, so that I can email my importer and make sure we don't miss out, because things happen pretty quickly sometimes.
Yeah, we haven't got anything coming out until next year, beginning of next year, but we've got what have we got? We're going back to Australia actually. We've got a load of Australian whiskies which are pretty exciting, I must admit, for me, as whiskey discovery. I don't know if you love but the birthday stuff that you haven't, that's on its way. It must be on its way. You haven't got the birthday stuff yet, which I've got behind me here. If you look on the Instagram pages of Boutique-y Whisky, I've put all the birthday stuff up there. So yeah, the Scotch series had we had new labels done from Emily in her style, because we haven't got we haven't got a master blender or a master distiller. So basically Emily is our master distiller, because she distills our ideas into labels. So she's been doing our labels for 10 years, and we decided that we would give her the brief of saying, well, these are the labels you've been drawing for 10 years, change them in a way that you would do them for the way you normally. She's a screen printer, a litho printer, and do it simple in a number of colors. And she's done them at a much simpler, and I just love the Klein leash, which we've got. I don't know if you can see that very well, but they are all on our Boutique-y Instagram. I've posted them all up there recently, and I'm doing some little video chats on them at the moment. But I love how she's changed these into much simpler styles. The Allt-A-Bhaine is absolutely, this is a 31-year-old Allt-A-Bhaine. It's the oldest Allt-A-Bhaine I've ever tasted. So 5 beautiful Scotch whiskies, I have to say, very, very old. And also some world whiskies that we bottled, including that Millstone 25-year-old that's come out of a proper old, look at the colour of that, it is opaque, a proper old sherry cask. This is not a travelling sherry cask. This is not a seasoned sherry cask. This is a cask that he's extracted out of a bodega that's tired effectively, and this is from the earliest single malts that he's made, 1996. This is, I'm astounded that he let us have this for our 10th birthday. But we've also got a French whiskey from Amore.
Dave, Sean and I tried that. I mean, there was a lot of very good whiskeys in that range. That Millstone was knockout. Like, I think that was the best whiskey in your range. I love the blended grain. I love the blended grain too, but that Millstone was knockout.
The Millstone is, yeah, Patrick is a superstar, and everyone loves Patrick. I think he's the distiller's favorite distiller because he's so passionate about distilling. It's not just whiskey, like you say. He makes rye, he makes grain, he makes malts, he makes rum, he makes Geneva, he makes fruit, eau de vies. He's passionate about distilling. He's been I think he made his first cuts when he was 12-year-old, spirit cuts when he was 12 years old, and he's been living in a distillery since he was, working in a distillery since he was a kid. Like, grew up in a distillery, 5 years old in the still, and clean it out for your dad. But yeah, he made his first spirit cuts at 12 years old, so he knows. Australia, we've got some. Starwood is different. We had Starwood in our first collection, but we've had some Lark, or we had some Kirsty Booth Lark in our Killara in our last Australian series. We've got a lot of new Australian distilleries coming up next year, which is a lot of fun. I can't remember the Scotch whiskies that we've got now, and I just tasted them a little while ago. I'm working ahead for the whiskies in all of next year at the moment, when we're doing some new label designs at the moment, which are just superb. We've got Emily doing some new labels for us, for new distilleries and some old distilleries, but a whole new style of label, just for a bit, just to up the game a little bit, because everyone's doing boutique-y labels nowadays. Ledaig, they're all doing boutique-y labels, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, the birthday collection, like I say, Germany, a little distillery called Allt-A-Bhaine. If you've never heard of Allt-A-Bhaine, you really need to check them out. They're tiny. How we managed to get some casks out of them, I don't know, because when they release something, normally there's a queue around the town. What I love about these little European distilleries is they are making whiskey for themselves and for their customers, and not for us. But we managed to get in there and grab a cask or two, and just making some absolutely stunning whiskey. Yes, it's young, but I bet you I could hide that in a blind tasting against some big old space ciders, and you really wouldn't be able to tell the difference. I've got a 7-year-old Allt-A-Bhaine in a Reeve Salts butt, which is absolutely delicious. A French whiskey from Amore. Amore is France's first single malt distillery. Some of the early stuff was, it was okay. There was nothing to write about. But what they're doing now, Dr. Jim Swan went in there and gave them a few hints and said, well, if you just tweak this and just tweak that, and why try and be Scotch? Why don't you celebrate being French? And all of a sudden, they're just making, I've just tasted some amazing stuff from them, and we've bottled 3 releases from them now, and they've done very, very well. So this is a mead, a type of mead cask that we bottled recently. Taiwanese whiskey from Nantou, they always disappear as soon as we put them on the market. What else did we have? Beautiful Tennessee rye, which was kind of cool. Yeah, just some really good stuff. I'm really looking forward about talking about Australian whiskey again. Some of the distilleries we have bottled once, 2 or 3 of them we bottled before. A lot of them are brand new to me, never heard of, and the quality of the stuff that they're bringing out is just superb.
One last question here. Jeff's wondering if there's any boutique grains we should be looking out for.
I'm sure we've got some more Invergordon coming up. I've seen some Invergordon in the pipeline. The blended grain is definitely something you want to look out for if that's coming over to Canada. I know some of it was coming over to Canada. This
Gorgeous.
this is a 45-year-old blended grain. We bought it pre-blended from a hoggy. It's two closed distilleries. So it's Carsbridge and north of Scotland.
Oh,
So north of Scotland was only around for 22 years, I think it was. And Carsbridge closed in 83. So it's a blend of those two. We bought it pre-blended, and it is beautiful. It's a little drop of liquid history.
yeah. Well, Dave, thank you for that. And thank you for taking us through this range tonight. I do need to follow up with you because we've got a few boutique whiskeys in this year's whiskey calendar. So I'll be in touch to arrange a quick convo about a couple of those. For anyone who's interested in the full set of the 4 blends, please send me an email. We'll be happy to set that up. If you're just hoping to poach one of the 52s, even though it's not legally whiskey, any bottles we have left will be put online probably Monday, Tuesday next week. But we've got good stock of the 22, 32, and 42 because they're wonderful whiskeys and great value. And that blended malt, the Glen Scotia, for me is something I'm really excited about. I really love that style. So thank you everyone for taking part tonight. Dave, as always, you are a trooper for staying up late and agreeing to do these tastings that keep you up until the wee small hours of the next day. So thank you.
Seriously, no big deal, Andrew. Like I said, if you wanted to start a little bit later, I would do that. Yeah.
I hear that, but I'm a human being and I wouldn't want to do that to you. But I am serious. Like, I've never been to Finland. And I've only been to Germany for Oktoberfest and what's it called? The Lindor's Whiskey Fair. So that is my entire experience of Germany. So I am open to potentially figuring out if our travel plans can at some point in the future coincide and some German and Finnish distilleries get visited.
Yeah, I need to talk to some of those Finnish distilleries, and we have an inroad to Kiro anyway, but I definitely want to talk to the other two about doing something up there. But yeah, I'm just thinking about hitting the German distilleries as well, because Germany's not too far. And there are hundreds and hundreds of German distilleries, but
there's just not enough time. We'll have to pick a couple of highlights. Well, listen, Dave, once again, thank you very much. Just some more good rugby on TV tomorrow for you. And as always, I appreciate you taking the time to join us for a tasting.
I absolutely love it, Andrew. You know that. And when you've got a lineup like this, it's a lot of fun. And I'll just say I've got to go and put a bottle of Allt-A-Bhaine in my shopping bag, that's for sure.
There you go. Well, if you strike out, I know where you can find one. So best of luck. Well, Dave, thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for taking part in tonight's tasting. And if we don't see you in a tasting like this again before next year, I want to say happy Christmas, happy Hanukkah, and a happy New Year to all of you if we don't see you in person or on the screen between now and then. So thanks, everybody. Have a good evening. And Dave, you enjoy your Sunday.
Thank you very much. I will do. Yes, you can have a quiet day tomorrow with a big brunch, I think.
I mean, technically it's today, but you get some sleep and enjoy the rest of today.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, check us out. Check us out, Boutique-y Whisky on Instagram, or Boutique-y Dave on Instagram and Twitter. But yeah, I'm trying to post a lot more stuff on Instagram. Rather than just pictures, I'm trying to do little videos on there because it's something I. Thank you, Jeff.
Dave, can we be confident that it's the real you on Twitter? Because that's kind of a thing now. So, is it the real you on Twitter or an imposter Dave
I do live on Twitter, but yeah, Twitter's gone a bit of a meltdown at the moment, hasn't it? I must admit. But if you have enough blocks in, I block everything that I don't want to hear, and I block all ads. I haven't got a check mark. I have a whiskey glass and a blue heart, and the blue heart was was really support the our National Health Service, although I think that might have been hijacked already, but it was for our NHS a little while ago. But I have a whiskey glass. Safest to have no check marks, absolutely. I can't do Mastodon, but yeah, Instagram is safe at the moment.
Yeah. Dave, I'm with you. I thought about that whole thing. I was like, I don't want to. It's just like TikTok. I don't want to have to do another thing. I don't want to do any more things. There's already too many things.
Aye.
Well, Dave, I'll see you on Twitter. And yeah, check out Dave's new videos this week at Boutique-y Whisky on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, presumably. But Dave,
I'll definitely be on Instagram. I don't know how to do the others, but
yeah. We'll see you there. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, have a lovely weekend, you all.